Thanks for coming down on a Friday night. I know there's lots of ways to spend your Friday night. Great to see you here. My name is Ryan Benz. I'm one of the co-organizers of the SoCal RUG, Southern California R Users Group, along with John Peach over here. He's going to be our esteemed moderator. And then Pablo, where are you? Pablo's back there. He's up. Pablo and Javier, they're both actually alumni of UCI as well. So great to have you out. Thank you all for your hard work. Just real quickly, I wanted to just give a few words about our group. As you could probably guess from our name, we have a focus in the R programming language. Does anybody use R here, or is anybody aware of the R programming language? Okay, great. Probably lots of Python users as well. So our group is really here to support the data science community of Southern California. We started actually many years ago as the Orange County R Users Group, kind of based out of here in Irvine. And we've been doing data science events here in Orange County for quite a while. We recently merged with another group up in LA, so now we've expanded our scope, and we're now the SoCal R Users Group. Mainly want to let you know you're all invited to come and join us at different events. Obviously, for the last several years with COVID, things have been a little bit challenging, but actually starting next week, we're going to have our first in-person event back. It's going to be here in Irvine at People Space. I'll tell you how to find this in just a minute, but we usually have food at the beginning. We spend some time networking with people, and then we also have a speaker that comes in and talks about some data science topic. And our members span diverse range of diversity. We have lots of people are industry professionals, like John and myself and Pablo and Javier, work at a variety of companies, work at Google and Microsoft and, name the big tech company you want. Some people work at government organizations. Myself, I work in biotech. So we really have a diversity of people that working on data science problems. The other, I think, main component of our membership is students. So maybe how many students do we have here? Yeah, quite a few. So that's great. So lots of our students come as well. And I think what's really important, I'd say, for you is networking, being able to network outside of your classroom and so on is really important for your career development. I wish I did more of it when I was a student, and so we certainly invite you to come out and join us. We'd love to have you. To find us, just Google search for us, SoCal or Southern California R Users Group, RUG. Our official landing page is on meetup.com. That's where you can sign up for the group. That's where all our events are. And then you can also, SoCalRug.org? SoCalR.org. So even smaller, SoCalR.org. Seek us out there. We have all our events there. Like I said, we have our first in-person event next week. We also do workshops. We had a stats workshop last week here at UCI. It went really well. It was well attended. We also do a hackathon every year. So we do lots of fun things related to data. So everybody here is welcome, and hope you can come and join us. Without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to John, who will kick us off with the event. Thanks, John.
Thanks, Ryan. So how was everybody doing today? Quietly nodding. So this is supposed to be a bit of an interactive event. In the beginning, I'm going to ask the panelists some questions that we've determined ahead of time, and then at the end, we'll have some time for Q&A. Once the panel portion is over, they'll be sticking around for a little bit, and you can ask them questions and stuff like that. So just basically swarm them. We also have a bunch of stickers over there. If you collect stickers in the R community, there's this thing where we have hex stickers. Like if you notice that we put the people's pictures in hex. So we have stickers there's some classic ones there. There's OC RUG stickers, which was our original group. We have some new SoCal ones, SoCal R Users Group, and some other ones. So if you collect stickers, go ahead and take them. Take as many as you want. We got tons. So let's start by having the panelists maybe give a couple of minute introduction about who they are, what their background is, and what they're doing now. Sarah, do you want to go first?
Is it on? Can you guys hear me?
No.
Should I talk like this? Should I talk with the mic? Oh, it's working now. Okay. Hi. Hello, everyone. First of all, thank you, John, for inviting me here to speak on this wonderful panel. I don't deserve to be here with Chris and Matt, but it went on. Okay.
Right.
But I'm excited to be here with you guys. So my background.
Try tapping on that.
With technical difficulties. This one?
Yeah.
Or just Hello?
Yeah.
So, my background, I did my undergrad in math econ, minored in statistics from UCLA, took a year off, went back for my master's in mechanical engineering, and then started off my first job at an agency. We were working mostly on data science applications of Facebook campaign optimizations. So it was really, really fun experience that I got there. Went over to MobilityWare, so we all share a gaming experience, so we have some familiarity there. And then lastly, now for the last 3 years, I've been at Snap working on their revenue strategy team, so I do a lot of time series forecasting, understanding where our revenue is going to land. So that's my really brief experience.
Thanks, Sarah.
It's so small. My name is Matt. Let's see, you started undergrad, so I'll start with that. I got my undergrad at UC Santa Cruz, go banana slugs, in accounting and business economics. It was a lot of fun until it wasn't, and I get a little tired of accounting. No offense to accountants here in the room. So I came actually here to UCI, the Polymath School of Business, got my MBA, and there I was struck by the data bug, fell in love with data analytics. Networked like crazy here at UCI and landed a job just down the street here at Taco Bell doing new product forecasting and top line sales analysis on a national level. My passion for gaming got the best of me, and then I went over and worked at Blizzard for several years doing on the Global Insights team there for marketing, publishing, and the Warcraft franchise, which was my favorite game there, and loved working there. I then left Blizzard and started the analytics team at In-N-Out Burger. So I have a theme here. I like to work within a 5-mile radius of my house. Was there for several years. It was a ton of fun. Established a whole bunch of analytics foundations and really moved data-driven culture forward there. But wanted to try a bigger challenge for myself, and now I'm at Meta, where I support a team of data scientists working on augmented reality.
Thanks, Matt.
Cool. Thanks, Matt. That was great.
Yeah, I tried.
I'll go a little further back. I'm still recovering from. I'm a Philadelphia person, so I'm still recovering from a Super Bowl loss this week. It's still sad. Slowly coming out of the media blackout, where I can actually enjoy, looking at things again on TV. So from the South Jersey area, Philadelphia area, I did an undergrad at Tulane University down in New Orleans. Computer science. Always knew that I wanted to work in video games. Definitely something that I loved doing. Was a big StarCraft 1, sorry. StarCraft 1. Yeah, exactly. StarCraft 1 player in high school. Got out to finish that. Ended up getting, my family's all in medicine, so I ended up getting an internship from my mom at the George Washington Biostatistics Center back in 2004. And worked on biostatistics data for about 3 years. Spent a lot of time in SAS. That was really my first coding language, was using SAS for biostatistics all day, every day. But it was it was pretty cool because they were publishing studies in Lancet, New England Journal of Medicine, and I was the person putting together all the data into those reports, sending it off to the statisticians, and it was really cool to see results from that. Super stressful though, because you got to get it right. So after that, I moved on to I was looking for jobs in video games. Couldn't really find them as a SAS programmer because apparently they don't use SAS to make video games. So I went out to California. I was going to move out to California. Was in the Bay Area for 3 years working for a really small business consulting shop, just doing data analytics in SAS for some of the big businesses up in the Bay Area. Had some really fun times, really interesting clients, credit cards, retail. If you think of some of the big, the big business clients up in the Bay Area, I did some consulting work for them. Then magical thing happened in 2010. There was a famous game company down here in Irvine, which I was a huge fan of and still kind of definitely a nerd for. Had a big game, and they were generating a lot of data, and they didn't really know what to do with it. So they hired a team, and I was a part of the original team that they hired to do data analytics for World of Warcraft, StarCraft. StarCraft 2 came out while I was there, so that was kind of a dream come true. And I worked there for 3 years. Got an itch with some friends to go and start our own video game company in about 2013. That's a really long story. We did come out with a game in 2015, and it's still up on Steam today. It's called Berserkers. I try not to maintain it anymore because it's hard.
You bringing it up?
I hope not. But John's maybe is a secret player over there. I got at least one or two.
Anything more complicated than Tetris and Solitaire?
Yeah. You don't have to play it, but if you want to go and spend $5 on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll give you money.
It goes for anybody. Yeah. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. And kind of rolled off of that into, I guess my role in all these places is usually as much more of an engineer, computer science engineering role. I did finish a master's while I was at GW working there in computer science. Always stuck with some data stuff. Was always super interested in doing data. Kind of rolled out of the biostatistics into data for big business, and of course rolled into Blizzard, doing data for Blizzard. And so have seen like the engineering techniques, the scales, all kind of go up and up and up over my whole career. Rolled off my own video game, and then had a contract job at SpaceX for 9 months, which was super cool because it's a rocket factory. And then was lucky enough to be a part of Amazon when they were starting to build their games group. They were looking to hire a data engineer to build their data architecture pipelines, start getting them set up with analytics, and I've been there for the past almost 6 years now. That's where I met John. We did some internal machine learning classes, and that was a lot of fun too, because I got to do like vector calculus again, which is hard, even when you do it a second time. And that's kind of brings us up to today, I guess. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Chris.
Thanks.
Since we have a little bit of a trend of going back earlier, I'll start off from birth. I started as a child. No, I'm kidding. So a little bit about me. I spent most of my life in academia. I have an inability to choose a career path. I started off in kinesiology, somehow ended up in mechanical engineering, and then ended up in data science. But every 5 years, I sort of tend to change my career. I've actually found that to be super powerful. So by having a really diverse background has allowed me to, when I'm working with my customers, really understand what they're talking about. So I'm at Oracle Cloud Infrastructure now. I used to be at Amazon, but at Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, they actually took our organization, which was the Data Science and Artificial Intelligence organization, and we bought Cerner for a couple of dollars. Cerner is one of the largest medical record companies in the world. We spent billions and billions of dollars on it, and stuck us in there. So now we do a lot of stuff related to healthcare. So my kinesiology background actually really helps me there when I'm sitting in the meetings talking to the doctors and the clinicians and stuff like that. Like, I can speak their language. So if you don't come from like a solid, hardcore tech background, I think in some ways you have some advantages, you have some disadvantages. So that's enough about me. So let's get started. So this talk is going to be sort of broken down into two things. We're going to talk about machine learning operations, and then later on we're going to talk about career development and then do some Q&A. So as data science has been developing in the early days, one of the big problems was you'd have the data scientists build the model, and then what do they do with it, right? So often they'd throw it over the wall to an engineer that knows nothing about machine learning, and they would stick that up. The industry is developing a lot more, and machine learning operations is becoming a mature product and mature processes now. So I would like to ask Sarah, like, what is your background in machine learning operations, the type of stuff you worked on directly, and people that you worked with, that type of thing.
I hope I don't start every answer, but. Go out. Can you guys still hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So when I think about what John just described, that was kind of almost exactly the setup that we had in the first agency that I worked for. So we had a data science team and we had an engineering team, and that was the closest thing to like a full life cycle and deployment of machine learning models in production that I've seen. The rest of my experience has really been on the more like phase 1 of MLOps, I would say. So the teams are really working on more batch predictions and not going into actual products, but they're still driving business results. So when I think about most of my experience, I'm thinking I spend a lot of time on data prep, data collection, ETL processes, and then actually building models and not really deploying them. I think of soft deployment as anything that even in batch predictions is still driving impact, but it's not really kind of closing the loop to, you know, real-time predictions that are in our products like Spotlight, for example, where we have full ML operations that help drive those predictions into full-scale deployment.
Thank you very much. Matt, I'll ask you the same question. So can you summarize your experience in MLOps?
Yeah, I'm a little more downstream probably when it comes to machine learning in the roles I've been in data science. I have a few projects I've worked on. I have some of my little cheat sheets here, my here that I was thinking about some of my role in machine learning operations and in the roles I've been in. So currently at Meta, we're a little familiar with machine learning there, and we had a voice assistant team that I sat on for a while, and we used obviously it has a lot of natural language processing that goes into that, and it really builds this robust model. But we would then look at the customer behavior with it all and find ways to tweak the model, build the model, find areas of opportunity, and so forth. So I guess you could say I was like part of that cycle, but a little more downstream, and then I'd come back around and we'd build it from that way on a like secondary level. Definitely though, we pioneered a lot of machine learning at In-N-Out Burger, where this is still kind of makes me like cringe a little bit. When I started there, they built, I don't want any connection with it, the annual forecast. They would have this brilliant gentleman come down and spend 2 months on an Excel sheet to forecast the whole next year's sales. And it was a wild endeavor. And I led the charge to incorporate not that, and we were then able to forecast sales on a per unit, per day, every day to really kind of build a much stronger understanding of where the company is going, and to be able to action on that and pivot and make us really strong decisions on that. And then finally, in Blizzard, a project I worked on that was really cool is we built this clustering algorithm based on, I was going to say it was like 36 or so inputs to build 6 or 7 different cohorts identifying World of Warcraft players based on all the different levels of engagement across, again, all these inputs. And we built entire business strategies, marketing strategies, even like, they probably deny this, but even some gameplay design went into it too, based off of this like active clustering we had of user engagement. So I got to work with all of those various projects, not in the actual building of it, but really on the I could make a joke here. I'm not going to. It was a wonderful input into all of our work.
Thank you, Matt. So I met Chris at Amazon, and when I moved to Amazon, I learned a new term, and they called it Amazon Scale, and it was a way of working your data like just at a massive, massive scale. And Chris is an expert in this. So Chris, can you tell us about not just what the type of stuff you do at Amazon, but the type of stuff you've done before at Blizzard and stuff?
Yeah. So like, and it kind of follows into the question, and like Sarah and Matt are both like spot on with most of like the history of doing this kind of work has almost always been in batch for sure. And then the stuff that I didn't really start doing until I got to Blizzard, which was taking your models that you're making, and it doesn't really matter. It could be the simplest model ever. We used to kind of make fun of this originally at Blizzard, which was they were having a big hacking problem where you would get your account hacked, and then everybody would sell your character stuff, and it would all go away, and you'd be pretty pissed about it. And the simplest thing to do was, we had a really great ML guy come in, and a good friend of mine, and he made a decision tree model to kind of identify, well, what were the characteristics of a login where it was like likely that this was not the actual player playing. And it was actually stupid easy. It was basically like, is this IP address for this player, from the country that they're playing from? Is the IP address in the same country? Because if not, then it's most likely not the player. And the person who was implementing this on the tech side, I don't think he even bothered implementing the decision tree. I'm pretty sure they just put the rule in. So when you're putting your ML model into production, or you're requesting that the engineers do it, they have a bunch of parameters which are like, well, how fast is the response time for the model? Because if this is a player logging in, you don't want to hold them up, when you're trying to evaluate whether their login is correct or not. I was also a little bit involved in I was working for a credit card transaction processor, and they're using ML models all the time, when you're scanning your Visa card, and it's telling you, like, no fraud, or no, let's just send the code to their phone to make sure it's not fraud, or like, nope, this one's fine. So all kinds of basic stuff there. At Amazon, I started doing something a little bit kind of goofier, which is, I call it like lazy querying. I guess it's like this kind of like fuzzy logic, which is to say, let's say that you've got a store, a location, like XYZ, in games it's always XYZ, but like a lat long for a store. And you've also got a lat long from a phone ping about when they're making a transaction, and are they in the store when they're making the transaction. Like you're Home Depot, and like you're making a transaction or you're making a query for an item over your phone, and then you have also a lat long for a store, right? You could come up with like this kind of fancy, like, well, if they're in this box and this lat long, then they're actually in the store, right? But the really lazy way to do it is just use an ML algorithm and just train on the lat long, and the actual, you could basically like create your own labeled data set and just train against that, and then use that to actually predict that the person is actually in this store, because the stores are really far apart. So you can get really lazy with this kind of stuff, and the algorithm that you would have to use, like, is nearest neighbor, right? Like something super easy. So I do a lot of this now, and these are super easy, simple algorithms to just stick inside of a whole pipeline. So whether it's login or marketing or fraud, the systems that will call out to your software, and then you return a result based on a machine learning model that you've put in from an analyst like these guys, is able to evaluate super fast. And even just using scikit-learn, Python is just fine. For those of you guys who like using AWS tech, I'll pick them and I'll throw them up into an AWS Lambda in a layer, and then they get called out, and it's super easy.
You could also use the Oracle Cloud too.
Oh, that's right. Oh, do we get a discount for that? I don't know how. Are they far behind still?
Yeah. 15 years behind.
Yeah. Oh, so big discount. But I guess I could ramble on about this for a while, because I kind of do it a lot, and it's kind of enjoyable. I guess the key thing is my background is mostly in software engineering, and data as a part of that. And I didn't realize I was a data engineer before there was data engineering. I just thought I was just a software person who did data. In fact, the job descriptions would say software engineer, data focused. I was like, oh, well, we actually have a title for that now. And when you do that, what you really want to focus on for your machine learning stuff and machine learning ops is the ops side, which is like you want to have a strong foundation, or find people that have strong foundations in DevOps, which is, are we using source control correctly? Are we doing continuous integration, continuous testing? Are we promoting our code up through stages, dev environments, beta, gamma, alpha, as many as you really want or need. Now, I usually use about 4 environments for most of my stuff. And it really lets you just mess things up all the time, which is fantastic, without actually ruining your service. Or like you can only mess up the thing that you're trying to mess up, and not the whole entire service. And so So that was a lot. There's any.
No, that's great, Chris. Thank you.
All right.
So what I get asked a lot is, what tools and technology people should be learning. There's a ton. There's always new tools and technology coming along the pipeline, and you can't go learn them all, and you can't be an expert in them all. So often what I tell people is look at the type of careers that you want to do. Go on LinkedIn, see what types of tools those people are using to build their pipelines, to make their life easier, to get models into production. So I'll start with Matt. What types of things what tools and technologies have you used to help build out your MLOps?
I haven't.
What were your team?
But no, so I haven't done that firsthand, and I think Chris is probably the best one on the panel to talk about that. No offense, we talked ahead of time. But I will say that when you are building something, make sure, I'm now speaking from my point of view, think of the whole process in mind. Think of the downstream user in mind. Think of what this model is going to be doing and how it will be utilized, its actionability in a business sense, in a product sense, the data scientists who are on the other side of things, how can they use this output to understand the product better, how can they tend and turn around and work with you to make your model better and so forth. So the hard skill, the tech used, I can't advise so much on that. I can advise more on like the holistic part of it and thinking about that cycle, because I have very much been in those shoes and I continue to be so. And it's so much better when it makes sense, when the model is clear in what it does, and I can, like, actually Chris was just talking about all the different processes, and releasing and everything. Make sure that's all clear, so you can benefit all the others in your orbit.
Thanks so much. Chris, same to you.
Let's see. So specific tools. Right now I'm doing a lot of Python. Like all the Python machine learning libraries are great. And I think it's because Python just becomes so ubiquitous for, I'm just loading files or data from somewhere. And then, of course, like now it's in a frame. Now it's in a data frame. And then I can use whatever machine learning models from there. Also, there's an insane amount of online help, tutorials, just the community is great. I have a good friend who Matt also knows, who's a producer person, and he makes fun of us all day long because all we do is just copy stuff from Stack Exchange. Now it's ChatGPT, which is great, right? Like great, well, thank you. so yeah, ChatGPT, use that.
So what type of tools are you using?
So right now,
streaming.
So right now, as far as IDE, I'm using PyCharm a lot as far as a tool for coding in for Python. For models in production, I use a lot of AWS Lambda, which is a serverless architecture for just running functions. For big data tech, we use things. I've used Kafka before, which is super fun for ingestion. Now at Amazon we make a lot of use out of Kinesis, which is their version of Kafka, and it's basically a big stream a place to send all your data to. Redshift, of course, is the kind of opportune SQL environment for big parallel processing of data sets. What else for ML operations that make pipelines easier? Lambda, I said Lambda, right? I keep saying Lambda. I like using Lambda a lot. It's super easy.
Talk just very briefly, what the streaming technology is, because some people may not know what that is.
Yeah, let's see. So, I think I was thinking about this because my daughter's 2 at home, and she's obsessed with trash trucks. I think data systems as a whole are kind of like a waste management system. You have people and households generating a bunch of trash. They put that trash into buckets, and those buckets get picked up with buckets on wheels, and then those buckets go to some central place where they get sorted and processed. Super valuable things go to another place where they just get recycled to actually be useful and fun again. And then most of it goes, off into a dumping ground where no one ever looks at it again. So I guess in the data parlance of our times, you would call the people generating your trash and putting into buckets is kind of like, that's the application, and the application probably has some local storage where that data is getting saved. And then the trash truck is kind of like your communication between your local storage, and your back-end sorting processing facility. And the sorting processing facility is really what Kinesis kind of is in the Amazon environment or Kafka. And it's at that point you kind of peek into your pile of trash and figure out what you want to be recycled, to go to the actual data warehouse where the analyst can actually look at it, figure out how valuable it really is, and then turn it into revenue. And then so that's where you have stuff getting from a Kinesis stream. You have processors, which is what I'm using a lot of AWS Lambda for. And then it going into a data lake, which is Amazon S3, usually in this case, if you want to manage data at scale, which is kind of like your just large dumping ground. And then the good stuff goes to the recycling center, which is kind of like a Redshift or a Snowflake, these kind of high-powered, analytics databases. And then from there, you have your expert analysts and managers kind of take it and turn it into gold.
Thanks, Chris. Thank you very much. Sarah, same question to you. What type of technologies have you been using or been around?
Yeah, so I like this concept of a relay race because each of us, there's people, process, and technology that are all involved in MLOps, right? And then each of us within our specific domains are experts on certain areas, and it's good to know when your expertise ends and someone else's begins. So I definitely see a little bit of that. In terms of technology, so I wanted to start by saying a lot of the projects that I've worked on, I feel like are hacked together solutions because I'm not a data engineer and I'm specialized in some area, and so I know how to do what I do well, but I don't know how to do the engineering and develop production code. So in hacking together solutions, which I've seen much of the data scientists that I've worked with and analysts that I've worked with kind of do, is essentially come up with a proof of concept that works but will break and if it's pressure tested. And so a fun memory that I had was we had LTV models that were built on someone's Mac, and she had just a cron job on her PC, and she had a cron job that would just basically run this every day, and when she wasn't around or it crashed, no one knew what to do, it was just on her laptop. Now at Snap we use Airflow. That's been a really nice change of pace, where now we have these tasks that we manage, and it helps build out essentially all of our data pipelines are built in Airflow.
Sarah, do you mind just giving a quick explanation what Airflow is?
You could probably do a better job at explaining Airflow than I can. It's basically
data orchestration,
yeah,
scheduling jobs.
It's
a super cron job.
It's a super, yeah, that's what I was just gonna say. So Airflow is big, Python is big, Git, I don't know if that gets included as a part of this, and then BigQuery ML. So those are what I would say are the tools that we're kind of working with.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Matt, I'll ask you, I'll start with you again. You have a fairly strong analyst background.
It's nice of you to say that.
You still owe me $20 for that, but I'll collect later. Can you talk about some of the challenges that you've had working with data that doesn't fit in a single machine?
Yeah, absolutely. A concept that you hear, a phrase you hear a lot is you can't boil the ocean, and that is so never more true than in this environment. I've tried. I actually we'll start off with a little story. It was my first Friday working at Blizzard, so I'd been there for just a couple of days, and I wrote a little query about my gameplay. And I was like, oh, look, that's me doing all these things that I do. And I was like, I wonder what everyone's looks like. And I did the worst thing you could possibly do. I hit run on my query, I locked my computer, stood up, and went to lunch. So I came back from lunch, and I had a data engineer sitting at my desk waiting for me. I was in trouble. It was way. And I learned pretty quickly there that you can't do that stuff. So why I bring that up is, with this big real world data, you have to be very strategic in how you're approaching it. You have to have this really strong. When dealing with this vast amount of data, you really have to develop a strong 1-2 punch. You have these wonderful technical skills. I'm sure everyone here in the room has, and then you add on this layer of what is the question I'm trying to solve? What is the user segment that I'm really trying to get to? What is the subset of the behavior I really want to understand? So it's this really strong knowledge of the product, of the customer, of the business you're in, and apply that strategically when attacking this giant sea of data. Building on this as well, we have real-world, big-time data. Responding to trends is something that this real big data it really sets you up for a lot of success when you're in this world. When I was at In-N-Out, it was more or less real time, and we had this little virus kind of hit about 3 years ago, and the entire company just pivoted directly. And to be able to very quickly and strategically say, this is everything that's going on, this is how we have to change supply chain, this is how we have to change the customer facing thing, this is how we have to really flip the business on its head. And again, that kind of is building off the things I said earlier. You couldn't just dump everything at once. You had to be strategic. You had to know what was going on, and you had to know the business pretty well. And that's, I think, a pretty unique challenge with that, I guess.
Thanks, Matt. I'll add a little bit to that. So when I started out working, everything fit into a laptop. And when I went and did my data cleaning, I'd look through the numbers and look for things that were odd and stuff like that. I just can't do that anymore. Right now, the project I'm working on does 1 billion transactions per hour. Right? I'm not loading that into an Excel sheet and looking for problems. So developing tools that will allow you to take what you would have done, the skills you learned, like looking at your data, line by line, and how do you do that at scale? How do you have distributed machines processing all that data, looking for those same types of things? It becomes a very different way of thinking about your data, but fundamentally, I do the same types of things related to that. So I'll ask Sarah this question. So you're fairly early in your career. I mean, you've been around for a while, but you didn't graduate yesterday. I'm assuming you've made mistakes like the rest of us. What types of mistakes have you made? What have you learned as you've been working in this area?
So this was a great question that I actually couldn't think of one. I couldn't think. I know you would think I'd have plenty to list. But yeah, this was a really
hard job because my team might hire.
It's not that I've never made a mistake. It's just that I don't know that I've made a mistake that has had such an impact that it's frontal, like that I have such a big memory of it. Maybe if I hear Matt and Chris, it'll inspire me to think of a challenge.
Okay, I'll pass that off to Chris then. So, Chris, I know you probably screwed things up.
Oh yeah.
I've seen your code.
Yeah. The nice part about when I screw things up today at Amazon, there's really just a huge bill at the end of the month that I have to answer for. And so let's see. Now, I thought about this one, and I'll go back to really early in my career because that's where we want to start from for these questions. So I was working in Biostatistics in their kind of data production systems, and my role as an engineer, software engineer, was to just aggregate the data and make sure that it could go through the SaaS production process to be checked against all of the the field checks so that the data validation is correct. Everybody that was entering forms for the studies, they're all within the appropriate ranges, right? Like your you're a female and you're pregnant, right? You didn't hit male and you're pregnant, like just the normal stuff that you kind of have to go through in biostatistics. So one of these studies was actually getting blood work from labs. There's an assay, and the blood work would get submitted to the lab, and there would be an assay, and the machine would do an analysis of the blood work, and then print out a report, and then that report would, of course, go to the lab management, and then they would send it on to Biostatistics Center. I remember this is 2005, I think. So I got put in charge of doing the collection of that data and making sure that we'd have systems set up to be able to read from their systems and then, of course, ingest it into our systems. And I had no idea how to do this. I was kind of just a new, kind of computer science graduate out of school. And the people from the various labs would talk to me, and they were like, "Hey, is a CSV file okay?" And we'll have it to be this field, and this field, and it'll be here at this FTP site with this name. I was like, "Yeah, that sounds great." And it was a disaster because there was a human in the middle of this process, which was someone at the lab would read the data off the machine, click probably through some website, click, oh, okay, export file from this run, and, stick it, and then, export it. How do you want it exported? Probably a couple of options, right? And then stick it onto the FTP file server, and then name it, of course, whatever they wanted, they could name it, and then have me pick it up, read it, and write it back in. So all of my stuff was failing all the time because there was someone who was just clicking the buttons every time, going through the process. It was part of their normal daily day. And it was terrible, and I couldn't figure out why it was broken all the time, and my management was on the call with their management, and I was in the room, and they were yelling, kind of this back and forth, bunch of nonsense. And I didn't. At some point, I realized, okay, no, this is a mistake. I made a mistake here. We should just let me figure out how to read the data directly from the machine, right? And if that turned into well, it's hard. You can't really read it. And I was like, no, it's not human readable. I know that. Just whatever the machine spits out, and you do nothing to it. Just do that, and that's it. That's it. Just do that. And that works way better. So.
So what type of things would you do now that would be different? Like what type of controls would you put in place?
I would nowadays it's way easier because you just call APIs. You call APIs from services directly. Don't let someone who's super interested in being a part of your data pipeline process be a part of your data pipeline process. It's not that useful. Call the APIs directly. And let the person who wants to be the analyst for your data pipeline process, those people are great. We love those people because they do a lot of work. But if there's someone who wants to be in the middle of your data pipeline process, try not to let that happen, as few as possible. If there is a team that wants to call an API for you and then create a new API just for you to call that API, not that useful. Because essentially, if you're comfortable with your engineering skill, or you have software engineers that are like, yes, we can work in any programming language, we don't really care, then they can call whatever API the machine, so if it's a blood assay that you're getting results from, right, the people who make that machine, like GE, will have documentation on how to get data out of the machine directly. So go and find that, and then just use that directly. Don't bother with whatever team is in the lab that's there to do software engineering. Maybe it's their analytics team. Just consume their end results. Those are interesting. But don't consume from the middle of their process, because as an engineer, it puts the dependency on them to get your work right. And you should just be calling the machine results directly, because those will always be the same. And when GE messes up their machine results, then the whole world gets their results messed up, and that's not even your problem at that point.
Yeah, I would agree. I used to do the same type of thing. I would reach into the middle of the stream because there was something there that I wanted, and it's just a bad idea. The idea behind an API is that you have a contract. I send you this, you send me this back, and all the complexity handled behind there you don't have to worry about. And that was one of the things I used to do too, was sort of I tried to get in at the lower level because, I have raw data, I can do more with it. It's often much better, smaller headache to just call the API. How about you, Matt?
It reminds me of the guy from Office Space, where he takes the customer request and gives it to the engineer.
That poor guy.
Right. That's a deep cut. I don't think anyone. So, you know that old adage, what happens when you assume? All right, I get some head nods. I won't say it, but I'm getting some head nods. That's the several things I want to point out here is I guess I'll say my story first. When I was at Blizzard, the head of marketing came up to me, and he goes, I got this brilliant idea. If we can convince people to subscribe to World of Warcraft for 12 months, we'll give them Overwatch for free. Now, maybe you guys know or don't know those products, and that's fine. We were going to, if you bought here, we're going to give you X for free. And I went and I did an analysis, and I assumed I knew what the intricacies of the data. I assumed I could just interpret the data outright and make my own conclusions. I also made assumptions on what the executive wanted, what he was looking for, and what his goals were. And I did not refer, I'm going to kind of pick this in here too, I did not refer to an already established source of truth, which is huge. If you are creating anything and it is doing output, do something that's already been solved. Do something that's already been established, and you can go, oh yeah, okay, I'm right, because you have something you can compare to. Because the last thing you want to do is someone go, well, why does this say this? And yours says this. Anyways, moral of the story is walking back an analysis from a senior executive that was like overly glowing and exactly kind of what they wanted to something that makes it seem like it was that proves it was a terrible idea is not a fun thing to do. Trust me on this. Not that much later, I started working for a different division. No. I don't know. Coincidence? Who knows? But yeah, so don't make assumptions. Find a source of truth that you can base things off of. Otherwise, there's so much tribal knowledge that exists in any organization. If you're trying to recreate something, you may have some big things you miss.
Yeah, I would second that. Usually your data, most things is poorly documented. Data tends to be really poorly documented, and it tends to sit in people's heads. And so it's really important to go out and talk to the subject matter experts as opposed to just reading the documentation that might have been updated in the last 6 months and might have been wrong in the first place. The other thing is that Matt was talking about, good engineers create, great engineers steal. So Matt was suggesting, like, go find solve problems. Pretty much everything has been solved, but you just need to tweak that a little. And a big part of it is understanding the complexities of the problem so that you can go figure out who you're going to steal from. Thank you guys very much. So let's move on now to early career development questions. So Sarah, so what are some of the challenges that you faced as you transitioned into your first career coming out of university? You had a bit of a different background. You studied mechanical engineering, and also mechanical engineering. And what you're doing now is very different.
Yep.
But you learned probably a ton of skills that are transferable.
Yeah. So I might take this one in a little bit of a different direction. So when I think about the challenges that I faced transitioning into the first job that I had, so when I think about my going back to undergrad and being in it was male dominated, fine. Basically I was in control of my own destiny, right? I got to study on my own, do my own exams, didn't have a problem. When I moved into my first role, I was the first female hired into a data science team. I was actually the first hire outside of my manager. Quickly, that team grew to include 4 more PhD males. And so I was the one female and the youngest on the team. And so talk about imposter syndrome. It was amplified at that point because I'm okay, I have a master's degree, all these are PhDs, they're all older than me, have much more experience. Why am I here? And what do I have to contribute? So, sorry. As much as I was asking myself those questions, I was also just trying to feel like I fit into this team. I think there was a few incidents that happened to me where I was okay, this is a wake-up call. Are you going to commit to being in this culture, and do you love what you do so much that you can see beyond? And so, I got tested pretty hard on that. And, now I think the team that I'm at Snap right now is pretty diverse, I would say. It's about 30% female, which is not bad.
That's huge.
Yeah. So yeah, like not aside from learning, like I actually started off in statistics at UCLA. We were basically learning R, and so actually my first day was like build a pivot table. I was like, what's a pivot table? So I didn't even know what a pivot table was, and then I had to learn Python from the ground up. So the technical hurdles were there, but definitely from the personal cultural side also plays a role.
Did you get support from your peers, or did you feel sort of isolated and alone? And was that real? Were you truly isolated and alone, or was it more your perception because they were PhDs? They were
So I can elaborate more. So I actually did I forget how long the contract role with Fox. So we basically got chosen, like a really smart PhD and then me. And the reasons for that were because he was really smart, the technical stuff, he got it down. And then for me, it was like I can do not only understand enough to help out, but like also understand enough to communicate to the stakeholders at Fox. And so that was a tough moment, because I think in that scenario, I actually was not like. It was very real, and every day I was like, it was very tough to come to work and feel like this person doesn't actually want to work with me. but it's not like of any fault of my own. It's just like perception of them feeling more comfortable working with the other guys in the group. So some of it was very real, and then others would just be passing comments, and it. Not that it's something that you ever have to like be okay with, but it's evident, and then you move into cultures that you like. So actually at Snap, they focus on DEI. It's a very it's a really nice team, and so you find companies and cultures that kind of make you feel good about kind of the work that you're doing, and then the team that you're a part of. So
a lot of women moving into this field. They'll run into this type of thing, right? They're not always going to go into cultures like what you have at Snap. And 30%, right? That's not a great ratio, but that's in this industry, that's a huge ratio. Were there things that you had done to sort of get support, either within the organization, outside the organization, finding mentors, or did you just sort of suck it up?
I feel like a lot of it was sucking it up. When I think about mentors, actually some men that I knew were my best supporters. And so, so I had managers who were very supportive. I had friends that were very supportive. Actually, a fun tidbit. There was a conference that was being held, and they had invited, interestingly enough, like it was just all men on the panel. And I was like, and then I looked at who the females on the conference were, and it was like the yoga lady was. And so I was like, this is a problem. And a few of my friends at the time were also being asked to speak at that conference, and I said, this is a problem, right? Like, and then they basically told the conference leaders, like, hey, we're not, like, we have an issue with this. Like, can you incorporate more females? After that, they asked me to come, and they developed a whole female panel, and they kind of started recognizing their responsibility when the people that they're catering to are a diverse set of audience, and all want to learn and want to also see themselves in leadership positions. So definitely felt some support along the way.
Great, thank you very much. So Matt, you've had a long, prosperous career. I'm assuming that your skills have grown over time. But when you started out, what was something that you did really well? And what is something that you would do differently now that you have more experience?
Yeah, something that I feel I found early on to help set me apart, to help move me forward and differentiate myself amongst my peers, was my writing, actually. And I kind of pride myself to be a good writer. I leveled up my skills here at Mirage, the business school, but being able to communicate well and succinctly and to the point, but also come across educated. I come across educated sometimes, but that I think really helped a lot. Now, I can go on and on about data-driven storytelling and making sure you're building influence, all that stuff, but it's that writing skill that I think I really leveraged to move forward. But what do I wish I had done differently? And so I look back to my early career, and then I look back to a lot of data scientists that I support now are just crushing it. And the difference, there's a lot of differences, but is taking big swings. And we have this brilliant data scientist on my team, and she came on, and she looked at a product, and NDAs are pretty ironclad, so I can't go too much. And she looked at a problem and said, what about this? And hit the ground running, and within 1 month, she was, I think, about 1 to 2 years in her career, too. Within 1 month, she altered a product's roadmap completely because she just took a big swing. She's like, I think this is wrong, or I think we should improve this, and she just went for it. Not in the space we're in now, but our CFO at Meta, she's I think 38 or so and she's only been at Meta for her entire career. She came on as a junior financial analyst and just kick butt and took names. And so these big swings early in your career, I think, can be really, really powerful to move forward.
Thanks so much, Matt. So, Chris, when I was at Amazon, I felt like a lot of my colleagues were just 22 years old. They might have been older, but I couldn't differentiate. I was so much older than you weren't one of them. So we have a lot of people that are early in their career, and you have an extensive background. When you're coming out of universities don't train you for a specific skill. They're more broad and general. What type of mistakes do you see people early on in their career making that they're sort of obvious to you now that you've got some experience under your belt? Probably because you've made the same mistakes. I know certainly I did.
Let's see. I always like thinking about this kind of question in terms of what mistakes did I make early on. I think one of for me personally, and I definitely still see this today, is not asking for help, not having that be your kind of first sort of go-to. Having this idea that oh no, I know what I'm doing. I'm just got my master's degree and I'm fully educated and I'm done, right? I've got everything. I can just code the whole thing if I want to. And then if you kind of go into it with this kind of resolve, and then you get stuck somewhere, and then you really beat yourself up quite a bit because you've never done this before. And so not asking for help is something that I spent way too much time spinning wheels. And I really had to get a manager earlier in my career to kind of just no, we're here, right? We're a team, we're here, we can help you. So just ask. So I see that definitely with people coming out of school, coming into jobs where they really just want to prove themselves, and it's cool. But I can help you I can help you prove yourself faster. So you'll prove yourself eventually. I know that for sure. But I can help you do it faster. So just ask for help when something's tough.
Let me piggyback on that. So I completely agree. Ask for help. I've seen lots of people spend days and days on a problem that if they just would have asked somebody, the problem would have been solved fairly quickly. The other thing is, don't ask for help when you first run into that problem. Put some time into trying to figure out. So when you go to the person, you can say, I've done this, this, and this. This is what I found. This is where I'm stuck. Can you give me some guidance? Otherwise, you actually don't really learn a whole lot. The other person's solving the problem for you.
Yeah, there was, just to follow on to that as well, right, and also what Matt was talking about, something that when I was struggling with things, something that made me feel was like a solution for that was for me to actually document what was going on in the code, what was going on in our data process. This kind of thing where you're following some like getting started documentation and you're failing miserably at a certain step, and like documenting all those failures, getting screenshots, posting them back on the page, writing out like specifically what you're doing. A lot of times like that prose can help you just get through it, but if it doesn't, people struggle with the same problems that you struggle with. So when you submit that work back to the to a Confluence page or the documentation that's already there, you're helping the next person. You're helping you're helping management because now they can onboard people faster. So especially when you're new anywhere, I mean, I do this every time I'm new to a job. Being able to document all of the processes that you're going through is always helpful. So I found that super useful as a new starting out in my career, just to document systems and processes.
Thank you so much. So, Matt, you were talking about somebody coming in and just making a big impact. And I had a team member do the same thing. So she, PhD in Stanford, postdoc at Caltech. She was brilliant. She had 2 years of experience. She was pretty new to the area. She didn't have the background, like a really solid background in machine learning, but she came in and a problem that I had been working on for a month, she solved it like that. She just looked at it in a completely different way. And I think that made a huge impression on me because she came in and she made that impression early on. So Matt, can you give some advice? Like when you're starting a new job, how do you make that new impression when you probably largely don't have an idea of what's going on a whole lot?
Right.
And do you think it's important that you do that?
To make a strong first impression? Yeah, absolutely. All those Head and Shoulders commercials from the 80s and 90s that told me that. You never. Again, I'm just full of old references. That's what I am. But really echoing what Chris said is these asking questions early and often. In fact, actually, one of my first managers would say, "Ask early, ask often." I don't want to be like counter to what you were just saying. Give yourself a little bit of time to unblock yourself. Totally agree with that, because give your manager something to react to. But so building off that, so if somebody comes on new to the team and they're inquisitive, right? They're displaying this like strong intellectual curiosity. They are asking right questions. They have their own ideas, but they have all of this. Well, that's all well and good. They're socializing it. They're going out and they're talking to people. They're going out and they're meeting with what we call XFNs, cross-functional partners within the organization. Okay, I'm on the data scientist team supporting X. You're a SWE, software engineer, supporting this. Let's talk. Let me get your perspective. You're a product manager. Let me get your perspective. And it's all that socialization. So it's like a month in, you will have some people. You have, let's say, an engineering manager and myself are talking, and he'll be like, "Oh, such and such, Jane came in and I already met with her." I'm like, "You already met with Jane? That's amazing." And talking and all this stuff. So the socialization is fantastic, asking for help, giving your ideas, having your own perspectives, but just knowing, and this is extremely true, but it's also a mentality I always try to tell others is you're not the smartest person in the room mentality, because you can learn so much from everyone else there.
Thank you so much. So Sarah, during your career, what new skills have you learned or you've improved upon as you developed?
Yeah, I think this is a great question. And I think by far and away, it's level setting expectations. When working with any stakeholders, they'll always ask for a lot and they'll ask for it tomorrow. Or yesterday. And so level setting what can be done and how much time is needed is it's hard to do, and it's hard to get to the point where you can have that conversation and be a partner especially if we're talking about early in your career and you're still developing your confidence. But it's definitely something that plays a really big role as you start to kind of move up and really start to keep people happy, because that's the goal. So keeping people happy means level setting expectations. So
what are some techniques you use to level set expectations? You know, if I come to you, your manager, or your skip level, and say, "Hey, Sarah, I want this analysis, or I want this pipeline fixed, you know, by the end of tomorrow."
Yeah.
And it's totally unrealistic. How do you deal with something like that?
So I think the biggest thing is over communication, because what I tend to see, and especially with folks on the team that I've seen who maybe don't do this as well, is kind of letting the ask kind of linger. And so what I tend to do is be on the err on the side of over communicating. Hey, got your ask. Let me take a look at it. So it's not a like, yes, I'm doing it. It's a, okay, let me investigate. And then once I do an investigate, hey, it looks like it's going to take a week, not a day. Are you okay with that? So it's all like taking them on that journey with you to say, hey, I can do this, can't do that, or I can do it, it'll just take a little bit longer. I think what you'll find is most people are okay with that as long as they're taken on that journey with you. It's when they don't know what's going on, they've left you with an ask, and you're trying to figure it out on your own, and then you're not communicating with them, is when I think issues come up.
May I add on to that?
Yeah, please.
Yeah. Most of the time in these situations, well, hopefully, this is not their first ask to you, or they're part of a team that is asking as well from you. And a simple way of doing this is going, great, this work sounds fantastic. What should I cut? What should I not do so I do this? And you kind of put it back on them. And honestly, being full transparent, I love the concept of over communicating. I agree, but you know, pull up a Kanban board or whatever project management platform you use, and work with them. You want me to do this? Great. Now, usually if it's your skip coming at them, you can still try to do the same approach. There's going to be some strategy in all of it, but working with them to help like manage the flow for the can be real helpful.
Yeah, one of the things I found to be very useful is say, okay, you need this done by tomorrow. Is that really when it needs to be done by? Because it can't be done by tomorrow. Or what are some resources? Or is there components of it that I could break down and get parts of it done, the critical parts done by tomorrow, and then the other stuff we'll pick up later on. I think it's really bad to say like, okay, I'll do it and then I'll stay up all night and work, right? It's ask for help. You work as a team. When you're coming out of school, that's one thing I found difficult is that, you know, team projects, everybody got together, they decided what they're going to do, they went away and they came back and glued their paper together. That's not the way it works in industry. Your team there is to help you. So setting those levels, as Sarah was talking about. So Matt, I want to ask you about the type of qualities that you are looking for when somebody wants to advance their career. Like, where should people be growing? You know, whether it's hard skills or soft skills, that's going to take them from their entry-level position to the next level up.
Yeah, I think just kind of building on some of the themes I've touched on already is this concept of intellectual curiosity, and are they showing a passion for really solving the big problems and really moving the product forward, moving the organization forward? And like specifically in my world, like I look for somebody who is able to design an analysis from the ground up, and I know it sounds pretty like when you have a question come across your desk, and you're like, oh, I would love to look into this. It's like somebody who can pick apart the question, understand what they need to research, what they need to query, what they need to build, know what the end deliverable needs to be, work their way from that, be able to communicate it well, and then socialize it well. Ultimately, who can take the question and build the biggest impact and like influence with their insights? That's what we look for to grow somebody within the organization. Somebody who is a little, kind of cuts corners, somebody who's a little more passive actually with their work, somebody who shoots more for like kind of, not bare minimum, because that you don't last at an organization regardless, but someone's like kind of more of a mid. That's, right, that's what the youngins say that really sets it apart. So somebody who's willing to go the extra, not only the extra mile, but be able to like really formulate everything start to finish, so they can then sell it in well. I think that would be real impactful.
Thanks very much. One of the things I've personally struggled with is work-life balance. I'm a recovering workaholic. And in industry, I've found that there's always more you can do. You can always raise the bar in terms of what your manager should expect from you. But people tend to burn out, and it's just not in the big FANG companies that have this problem. A lot of startups have this problem and stuff like that. Chris, you've been in these big tech companies for a really long time. You're a survivor, and you seem to have a good work-life balance. You have the time to come out on a Friday night and talk to people. What are some of the things that you do for work-life balance?
You sometimes bring your family. Hi, guys.
This is quality family.
Yeah, well. I think this is actually, in the games industry, this is something that is very much has evolved in the past 10 years for sure. When I first started at Blizzard, they were trying to get StarCraft 2 out, and they were buying food for everybody 24/7. Like, can we do everything we can to try and figure out how to keep you at your desk? And I was 27 and thought it was great. Like, this was like, this is perfect. I have everything I need. That's how you really do get burned out on a project or a place, and even people, because you're not supposed to spend that much time with the same people. It's just not a good idea. So I think work-life balance has to be something that you actively work at, and you just have to ignore the company, like straight up just do it. And early on, I discovered a technique when I was working as a consultant, which served me really well, because as a consultant, you're kind of, when you have a client and they could be really needy, they could just always want your attention, and it's always very important to make sure that you have a good value over your time, and that feel like your time is super valuable. And so working as a consultant, I knew what I was getting billed at, and my boss at the time said, we never lower our rates. So never discount your value as a person and like what you offer. So never lower your rate. And then you can always tell your client, your data, whoever they are, hey, look, I'll be happy to pick up the call, but it's always the same price. And during these hours, like I might not be in a state where I can actually answer your question correctly to the best ability, but I'm still going to charge you the same price. So I might have pick up the phone and you just might hear a crying baby for an hour, and it still costs the same as like if I pick up the phone during a business hour. So never discount yourself. And I think if you start from that point, then you realize like how much your work-life balance is just super valuable to you, and then you use it however you want.
I had a friend who, he was also a consultant, and he had a very, very needy client that would call him all the time and like ask him questions for like 15 minutes, and it was very much interrupting his work because he needs head down time to concentrate on what he's doing. So he went back to the client and said, I'm introducing a minimum 4-hour billing. So if you call me and you talk to me for 15 minutes, that's 4 hours. And that became a very successful way for him to value his time.
I do that too. Whenever somebody's asking you to do an estimation for an engineering project,
same idea. Like, no, I don't do blocks smaller than half a day of work. Like, oh, it's just a little thing, right? You just change a thing here, you write a simple query. It's like, no, it's a half day of work. And just like, don't even try to do anything smaller. And then people will respect your time more, because essentially what you're telling them is that like, no, if you're going to have me do something silly and small, then like, I'm going to do it a lot.
I just want to add on. Sure. One like literally the tiniest thing, but it is so impactful. I hate having two phones, but it has been the greatest thing that has ever happened to me. Because there'll all be a point where you're like, oh, I just want to commit, and I just want to be so like the best employee I can be, and I'm going to put my work email, my work calendar on my personal phone. That is the worst thing you can do. Please do not do that. Get a second work phone, and then at 5 o'clock or whenever it is, you just take it. This is my personal phone. Just go like and it's done. And literally, this is so magical. No one at Meta can reach me outside of work channels, and it has been the greatest thing ever. And really stick to that.
What's funny is that we, when we can't reach each other over Slack or email, we snap each other. So, but then it's good to remember we're not saving lives. So that's like the other part.
So Sarah, you've talked about some of the challenges transitioning out of university into industry. What are some of the sort of the soft skills that you've had to develop to make that transition? Because the academic environment is very different than the industry environment.
So soft skills I've had to learn in the transition?
Right.
Okay. Well, first of all, I'll say soft skills will help you advance in your career, full stop. Technical folks who can pull in some good storytelling and good written and oral communication will do far, far better and excel much quicker than those who don't put any effort into that. So in terms of so I could talk about the way I've been challenged into learning how to do that quickly. So I very early on, when I was starting to learn all of the new machine learning, because when graduating with a stats major, you learned a lot of regression. And then above and beyond, it was a lot of learning on the job. But as a part of learning a lot very quickly, I started machine learning meetups. I was doing them monthly at Ticketmaster, and it was a lot of fun, and I was presenting stuff as I was learning it, and it was just really putting myself in the spotlight of just really testing my communication skills of things I was learning. So I kind of fast-tracked my way into picking up communication skills pretty quickly, and then I also taught a 6-month boot camp. I just did a lot of things that kind of put me in a spot of just really refining my communication skills. Trying to think of other soft skills. Those that are introverts, by the way, I don't think that you necessarily need to orally speak up in meetings all the time. I have a lot of introverts on my team, and I tell them, if it's a Zoom call, just add things in the chat, or they can be really, really good at communicating via email. Their written communication can be very strong and offset them not like speaking up in meetings and whatnot. So being an introvert isn't a bad thing. Like, it's actually just finding means and mediums in which you can exercise your skills. So.
One of the big things that I learned, so I came out of academia, I was there forever, and in academia, somebody says something, you challenge it. And we can have extremely heated debates, but they're never personal. I've had some friends watch me debate with my academic friends, and they're like, "Oh my God, that guy hates you." I'm like, "No, we get along great. We're going out afterwards." But sometimes you can't do that in industry. Most of the time, you can't. You have to coach what you're saying in different ways, so that you're not just saying "Nope, that's wrong," and here's why I think it's wrong, and now you need to prove to me that's right. For me, that was one of the big skills that I had to learn.
Yeah, we have at Meta, we have a phrase, assume good intent, but we've actually appended to it, but verify. And so, there'll be thing where somebody will come in and they'll just be like guns blazing and try it and then be very competitive with you in your position. And they ultimately want to make the product better. They want to make the experience better for the user, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's understand their position, understand where they're coming from, verify if it's being, it's factual. So again, maybe that's different from academia, I imagine. Well, at least let's say in school, right? That's what the question is more based off of. You kind of have to take it that everything your professor or your teacher is saying to you is fact, and that is how things are, and that may not be the case in the real world.
I also want to add on to that is that virtual environments can really stress test this too. So when you don't have social capital built up with people in the company and now you're arguing over something where you've only ever had a virtual relationship with that person can really, exacerbate that. So.
I've got a Elon story that's relatively related to this topic.
He's great with people.
On Twitter, yeah. So I was contracting at SpaceX, and this was 2016 or 17. They blew up a rocket on the launch pad, which is, you're not supposed to do that, and it's kind of the worst thing that could happen. And the company's everybody's of course like really down, and he comes and he does an all hands meeting with everybody at the company, and he says something super fascinating, which I think goes into like the soft skills category. Obviously, you want to figure out why did we blow up this rocket? We're not supposed to do that. Well, what went wrong? And he says a standard thing, which I've heard before from senior executives, which is like, don't be afraid to ask any question, right? Like, don't be afraid to follow any lead, ask any question, whatever you think went wrong, like, follow that up. But then he said something super important, which I thought was more important after that, which is say, but remember, be aware that anyone can come to you and ask you a question about what they think went wrong. And it's your responsibility to answer those questions as egoless as possible, was the word he used. Just, no one is saying it was your fault. No one is trying to, take your job. We're just trying to figure out the problem. And that's really it. So ask any question, but just remember that someone can come and ask you any question.
Thank you very much.
Where'd he go?
At this point, I would like to transition over to the Q&A portion. So if you have a question, please just raise your hand and I'll call on you. Please try to have like a fairly direct question and not like a huge comment. And if you have a particular person that you would like to ask the question, please direct it to them. Right here.
Yes. Okay. My concern is that now there are quite a few short-term program like the boot camp and so on. Okay, so my concern is how many people really have the skill? How many are just look good on paper? And how can you screen that?
One thing, I'll take a shot at that. Yeah. One thing I really like about this industry is that nobody really cares what your background is. They care what you can do. So tech interviews, I think, are generally brutal because they're not looking at a piece of paper and saying, oh, you went to Carnegie Mellon and you got a CS degree and therefore you're good, right? That's a really good school, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't mean much. Like, that might get your resume paid a little attention to. One of the developers that I work with had a degree in playing the cello, and he was an amazing software engineer, all self-taught. So whether you go and you learn from a boot camp, I don't think the boot camp is going to guarantee you to get a job. I don't think that you go and you get a degree, it's going to guarantee you to get a job, right? You have to be able to go into the tech interview and prove that you have the skills that they're looking for. Mm-hmm. And I think that's great about this industry.
I would just say I spent a decent amount of time interviewing people for our teams at Amazon, and when people are telling the stories about the projects that they work on, and you just start asking specifics, like, well, what was your role? Like, what did you code? Tell me in I words, right? I don't want to hear about we or a team. We're looking to hire you as a person. You can usually tell who has just kind of like heard the stuff and then who has done it and is in the trenches just based on the details, like just continuing to ask for details.
Any another question over here?
Yeah, so I understand all of you are relatively high up in terms of the career advancement phase. I am a university student, a third year. I'm more interested in what kind of qualities you're looking for if you're ever involved in the hiring process. What kind of projects or classes, skills, programs do successful candidates come from? And what kind of advice do you have for people like me? And I understand, like one of you mentioned, bootcamp. Yeah, so what kind of programs, what kind of projects, classes, skills are great for candidates for a job?
Oh gosh. Well, kind of building off the last set of answers here is it's like two stages. Getting a job. I'm going to speak for tech. It's, does the recruiter have they acknowledged and blessed your resume to move on forward? And then you have the brutal onslaught of the interview rounds, the loops. And so part one. So how do you get your resume noticed? What classes to take and so forth? I think that was part of your question is, well, what are the requirements of the job? I mean, the recruiter is, not to diminish the recruiter's job at all, but they're connecting the dots. They're building a puzzle. Does your resume have all of the words that the job description has and all of the requirements and so forth? So if there's a strong connection there's a good chance that you are now going to be ascended to the interview. And now when you're the interview, I guess it's, again, as John was saying, and Chris, we can snip through BS pretty quickly. So answer the question directly, thoroughly, and honestly is I think the best thing I could the advice I can give. There are so many times where I've been on the other side of that interview table, and we'll ask a question and then it goes off in this way, or it goes off in a tangent, or you could tell they don't quite understand, and instead of asking for clarification, instead of asking for me to or even acknowledging that they don't know how to do it or understand, we get some kind of nebulous, kind of fuzzy answer. So be truthful, be honest, be direct, know exactly what they're trying to get to in the interview, and go on that. And it's going to be very similar to the job description. It's if they're looking for an engineer, make sure you know. Well, gosh, I don't know how to engineer. I shouldn't be saying that. If a data scientist, make sure you know how to break down a problem very well. Make sure you know how to form a hypothesis. Make sure you know how to tell that story with data. If you're early in your career, you can't obviously lean on hard experience you've done, but lean on some of the education, the projects you've done. One thing I really, really encourage all people, if you're either new to a specific industry, like if you're switching from one thing to another, or if you're early, is do a project on your own. Actually, we found out a friend of mine who actually worked with Sarah he came into this interview, and he actually came from academia, and he wanted to be a data scientist, and he slid over this packet of all of this work he had done on one of our video games, and he had a hypothesis, and he did all this stuff, and it impressed me so much. So now I'm going on my own tangents here, but come prepared and be real relevant to what you're trying to get to.
I'll add a little to that. So in terms of what projects you want to do projects in the area that you're interested in. So if you want to be a data engineer, set up some pipelines, push some data around, that type of thing. If you want to be a data scientist, that is marginally interesting to me. But then be able to talk in detail what you did, what decisions you made, what trade-offs you made, what problems there were, that type of thing in the project. And outside of the project being relatively related to the job that you're getting hired for, to me, it doesn't really much matter what the project is. It's whether you know what you did and can explain it and understand the risks in it and that type of thing. The other thing is for especially undergrads, you all look the same generally. You all basically took the same classes. You all basically did the same projects. So how do I tell you from this other person, right? Go do something that differentiates yourself. So Sarah talked about running an organization, that type of stuff. I think that type of stuff is great. Somebody with a 4.0 GPA and has done nothing doesn't impress me as somebody with a 3.6 GPA and has a bunch of experience doing other things.
Yeah, I was going to say volunteering is a really good idea because, to John's point, a lot of the projects start to look exactly the same and it's not that meaningful. So volunteering in any organization or opportunities that you can find. I know Hack for LA has been a big one, and I did some projects with them, which is really nice, and projects that I can speak to and impact that I had. So I would say volunteering. And then the other piece to keep in mind is that when you're hiring a candidate, there's always a trade-off. And so you're never going to get the candidate who checks off every single box, and there's going to be a compromise somewhere. And so they're going to have to say, okay, well, it checks off X, Y, Z, and then we'll train them up on this thing. So you have to appear trainable. So that I would just leave that out there.
Another question?
Yeah, so is it important for me to have know my vision and my mission, my core values, my cultures to find a good job? And if so, what are those kind of things that how do I know that I have a clear culture, clear core values?
No, not. So the insight that I like to give people on hiring, recruiting and hiring is just like Matt was talking about. It's a funnel analysis on you getting to an interview, and then once you get to an interview, which the funnel analysis is, you got through a stack of papers on the recruiter's desk because of the matching of the words. Great, good. You get the data science done. When you get to an interview, I think a team and a hiring manager is really looking to answer like three questions about the candidate that they're interviewing, and those are, can this person are they skilled enough to do the job? Like, are they capable? Right? Like, if we put code in front of this person, will they be able to like fill in a function and do it right? Will they be able to query a data set and get some data out and then run a simple model? Like, whatever the skills are of the job. The second one, are they motivated to do the job, right? Like, you can have the most skilled person in the world, and they just don't want to work, right? Like, this, like, are they motivated to do the job? Do you really, like, want to come in every day and, like, actually advance something in the company? And then the last one, which I think actually is the most important one, is the, like, well, do we like them? Like, just to kind of simple culture fit. Yeah, because when you're working with people on a team, our current work life is like, okay, 40 hours a week. That's a lot of time to spend with teammates. So almost across the board, whenever I'm in a hiring, or as a hiring manager, or as another team member who is on a group that's part of a hiring, like the culture fit is one of the biggest ones. So, and I think that goes in like, are they trainable, right? Like, is this a person who's going to come? Are they going to want to learn? Or are they going to want to come and just tell everybody what to do because no one wants to work with you? Unless you're in charge, I guess. But even then, they don't want to work with you. So, yeah, those three questions I think are important. Can you have the skills? Can you do the skills? Will you do the skills? And then, do we like you?
Yeah, I just add on real quick. In every company except for my current one where I work, that was absolutely 100% true. I would say, do you have a passion for what you want to do? Do you have a passion for the product or the brand? It's like, the thing I hated hearing when I was at Blizzard was people go like, I'd do anything to work at Blizzard. It's like, no, you should come to Blizzard and go, I love Blizzard and I just love data science. And you're like, okay, now let's talk. And then, yeah, do we want to sit next to you for 8 to 10 hours a day? Okay, but that's very well true. I do want to do one amendment here. At Meta and at probably some other tech companies, it's a very, 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 very structured interview loop. And it is, can you do the job? And we sound soulless by saying this, but like this culture stuff actually doesn't play as big of a part. It doesn't manifest itself that well. It does to an extent, but it is a series of very job-focused questions that try to weed out people who may not cut it. So, Chris is absolutely true, but also keep in mind that where you're applying may have a very different interview style, and research what it is. I could talk at length for Metas, because it is brutal.
Please go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to thank the panelists for sharing your knowledge and experience with us. So my question would be to Sarah, because she's dealing with strategy and she's dealing with strategy in the company. So how much trust you, and what would be your advice how to make your stakeholders trust you in your decision-making process? Because I'm sure that you are dealing with it, that's your daily task. So what skills you need to have to increase the trust of your stakeholders in you personally? Because I know one thing is like when you have like a big company standing, like, like behind you, like your staff, Oracle, Meta, and personally you as a team member, what like extra skills you think that you would need to have in your career?
So if you didn't hear, it was basically, what are the skills you need to earn trust with the people you work with? Is that a good summary?
At the strategy level.
At the strategy level.
Yeah. I mean, I could say this simply, like, let your work speak for itself. I think when, when I think about when I joined Snap early on and being on the revenue strategy team, I think there was a lot of trust building that needed to be, needed to happen just because people didn't see I don't want to talk bad about the team, but it was just questionable of how much impact we were having, let's say. There's been a lot of restructuring and a lot of things that have happened since that have kind of helped bolster that, but I was coming into a team where and a stakeholder that didn't really value the output that was coming out, and so I was asking myself that exact question. I'm like, how am I going to get him to care about the models and the output that I'm building? And at some point, I think in lots of conversations and in lots of him seeing oh, Sarah's models are actually producing accurate results, and oh, okay, maybe our processes are a little bit flawed, and maybe we should be relying a little bit more on the strategy team to help guide our strategy. So it takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes a lot of communication, and then a lot of it is just letting your work speak for itself, but having avenues to surface that and communicate that and make sure that it's coming across.
Thank you very much. That will be our last question, but the panelists are going to stick around later, so you can swarm around them and ask your questions. I want to thank the panelists very much, Sarah, Matt, and Chris, for coming out and answering these questions and giving up their Friday night. And I want to thank Brian. He's runs the Masters in Data Science program here that the R User Group partners with, and is able to put on events like this and have a bigger reach and stuff like that. So thank you very much, Brian. And thank you again to the SoCal RUG organizers. So we have Javier, Pablo, and Ryan in the back. If you just want to stick your hand up. Thank you very much to you guys. And of course, a very big thank you for everybody coming out. We really appreciate it. I hope you learned a lot. I hope you got something out of this, and get you thinking about what you want to do in your career and what different options are, and a little bit about how you work at MLOps at scale at these big companies. So thank you very much.
We get a round of applause for John too for